You mentioned two words there which intrigued me, disruptor and innovator. And why is it so important to be a disruptor and innovator in the SaaS space?
We know that customers don't always know what they want, so we've got to stay close to our customers to really, I guess, think about what they want before they even know they need it.
Data is the new oil, and if you don't know how to read it,
Yep.
You're falling behind.
Well, so maybe that's the other bit of advice, is also recognize that, sometimes whilst you want to move faster, you need to kind of bring others on that journey.
Welcome everybody to another episode of SaaS Stories. Today I'm super excited. I'm joined by a local Northern Beaches person like myself. Don't usually come across that many of us in the world of SaaS, but Leah Rankin, Chief Product Officer of SiteMinder. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here and to meet a fellow Northern Beaches folk. That's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your SaaS journey, your life story. How did you get into the world of SaaS?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually went to university and did a Bachelor of Arts degree, which certainly doesn't suggest SaaS or tech by any stretch. But I actually was working at Telstra, which was a role I took on not long after finishing university. And I actually just happened to be asked to join a meeting where I was asked to take notes. And it was a meeting that was held between IBM and Telstra, talking about one of their new technology solutions. And I, of course, was taking notes, and not being one to kind of not speak up at times, I realized that one of the conversations they were having was leading down the wrong path. They were talking about this possible implementation of a solution, so integrating one tech solution to another. And because I'd been recently in training and learned how that worked manually, so through human intervention, I realized that what they were talking about may not work. So I piped up and decided to just offer some thoughts in a constructive and somewhat sheepish way. But that actually led me to being part of that project team and led me into my world of tech and obviously onto SaaS, as SaaS became obviously very much a prominent piece of tech for the future.
Yeah, well, I think I did that same arts degree, first of all, so I don't think it's strange to end up in SaaS after arts. There's always an opportunity, and
Absolutely.
I mean, just look at how far AI has come, and we don't know what jobs are going to exist in the future and where we'll end up, so it's exciting.
Yeah.
And so eventually from that role, in Telstra, you ended up at SiteMinder. Tell us a little bit about SiteMinder and what are some of the key factors that they specialize in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd probably describe SiteMinder as, let's call them the pioneer of a tech in the hospitality space, behind 125 million reservations per year that flow through our platform. And that platform essentially provides our customers, the hotelier, the opportunity to access more of the right guests through the right channel, which ultimately, of course, drives more revenue into their business. So really, we're helping provide that solution by, mixing together sort of data, the distribution capability, which is very much accessing online channels as well as direct channels where guests are searching and booking, and bringing that all together to optimize revenue in the platform. So in a nutshell, that's sort of who we are and what we do.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about the hospitality industry. Like, does the right guest make all the difference? Because I would have thought that they would just want as many guests as possible.
It's an awesome question, and this comes up quite a lot. And in fact, it's part of some of the innovation that we're doing in the platform today is really making sure that we can profile not just the hotel to really understand what the needs are of that hotel. And for an example, you might have a hotel that is very much looking for corporate guests, business guests, versus one that perhaps is very family friendly. And so when you're thinking about profiling that and then profiling the guest as well, making that match, it's almost like dating, but making that match is really important, because if you think about your experience as a guest, and I'm sure we've all had this experience where you've perhaps perhaps chosen a hotel because you're at somewhere for a work conference, you're doing a bit of work, you've got kids playing in the pool, you've got kids running up and down the hallway. The two of those don't necessarily always work together. So that match is actually more important than you might think. And I actually think moving forward, it becomes even more important.
No, absolutely. Now that you said it, it makes so much sense. I mean, it's like the basic principle of marketing is know your niche, who is your target market, and obviously cater to them because, when you're focused on everybody, the message just gets lost. When you're focused on your specific audience, that's when you get them coming to you.
Absolutely.
As the Chief Product Officer, what were some of the initial challenges you faced with SiteMinder?
So I've been with the company now 6 years. So maybe I'll kind of go back a little further just to talk a little bit about SiteMinder as a company and how they even entered into this space, and then we'll kind of fast forward to my time if that works for you.
Absolutely.
Because I do think it's an important story. I think if you go back to 2006 when SiteMinder first became a thing. And came into the world, SaaS was not really a thing. It was very new. In fact, cloud solutions were also not very common. And so actually SiteMinder came in as a cloud-based solution from the get-go, which was quite disruptive and quite innovative at that time. Hotels had what were called on-prem solutions or on-premises solutions. So essentially, as the name suggests, the tech would sit in the property and be installed in the property and actually be ran and maintained from the property itself. So having this cloud-based solution obviously was quite disruptive, but also offered an opportunity to be a lot more accessible, cheaper, because you don't have that upfront capital for the install and the investment that you need for an on-prem solution. So that was something that I think was really at the heart of who SiteMinder was as a disruptor at the beginning. In addition to that, the nature of the solution was also quite disruptive. So what I mean by that is if you go back before SiteMinder, hotels, to get their inventory, essentially their rooms and rates out to guests, would have to go into online travel agents individually. So these are your Booking.com, Expedia's, Agodas of the world. They would go in, update their inventory, and then as a booking comes in, they would have to go back in and manually edit each of those systems to make sure they didn't get double bookings.
Yeah.
So our founders, Mike and Mike, who came up with this opportunity back in 2006, saw this as a bit to build what is called a channel manager that is essentially one platform where you can maintain and manage all of that inventory. And so not only giving you loads of time back, obviously, as I'm sure you can imagine, but also removes that manual error or that error of double bookings, which is obviously a cost to the business and drives a really poor guest experience. So that's kind of where we came from, which I think is sort of our foundations. But obviously, as time has moved forward, really thinking about how we can continue to be that disruptor, that innovator is really at the heart of who we are. And certainly joining SiteMinder 6 years ago, I actually joined as chief customer in the customer space and eventually moved into a chief customer officer role before moving back into product and tech. And I think that allowed me to really, truly understand the needs of the customer, which obviously is so important when you're delivering software solutions, particularly in the SaaS space.
Yeah, amazing. You mentioned two words there which intrigued me, disruptor and innovator. And of course, I think of all the famous brands when you say that, but why is it so important to be a disruptor and innovator in the SaaS space?
I think it's important. Well, number one, we have to stay ahead of the game, right? We have to be competitive. This industry, there's so much tech out there, particularly in the hospitality space, but in any industry, that is true. The world as it's evolving, and you touched on it in the intro with AI. No podcast is a podcast without talking about AI these days. But honestly, the world's changing. You mentioned it yourself, and it's so true. And so it means that building solutions is becoming so much easier. You know, coming smart people coming together to build solutions for, you know, problems and solving problems and creating opportunities. You know, that's becoming easier and easier to do. You know, APIs are becoming easier, and that means integration is easier. The world is, you know, is changing dynamically and rapidly. So certainly for any tech company or any company, you have to stay ahead of the game. And I think it's really important. And certainly we really truly believe we've got to be thinking ahead and thinking forward. We know that customers don't always know what they want. So we've got to stay close to our customers to really, I guess, think about what they want before they even know they need it. Which of course is very much important in any place where you're building and solving a solution for a customer. But to do that in an innovative way is really important. And for us, you know, we've got a lot of data, as mentioned, that goes through the platform. So thinking about how we can leverage that. We've just appointed a new chief data officer just to really, I guess, capitalize on what we can do with our data, particularly in this world of AI, which is fast emerging and very exciting. But
It is. I love that you just said that, Chief Data Officer, because I've been actually quoting someone who would say this: data is the new oil. And if you don't know how to read it,
yep.
you know, you're falling behind.
100%.
I guess with that in mind, what are some of the key skills, you know, with now that all this has become easier, API integrations, coding, even AI can do that for us.
Yep.
What are some of the key skills aside from a data officer that you're looking for in the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, you're looking for people who are enthusiastic, are keen to learn. I always say attitude and aptitude are the most important things. You know, the world changes so quickly that, you know, as we even just touched on jobs, there are new jobs emerging all of the time that we don't even know what's coming. So having people that are willing to learn, having people who are smart, can keep up with the pace. I think that's really important, you know, in a world where, you know, we are an ASX 200 company. We've got very high growth targets, as we should, and that brings with it a lot of pressure. So, you know, having people that can really thrive in that environment, I think is important. But as much as AI is going to change the game and can do a lot of the tasks and help automate a lot of those manual tasks, it doesn't take away the creativity. In fact, it makes the creative space even more important. And so I think that's where, you know, looking and finding people then and that can really fill that gap to drive and empower, I guess, this new world of AI, I think is also really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. No, that sounds really interesting actually, because you know, you always wonder as a human what's going to be my place in the future. And creativity, I have heard a number of tech companies mention this, and the way that they, you know, encourage creativity in their organization is just by allowing people to have ideas and not being afraid to fail or get their ideas rejected. Just they say the best way to get to a great idea is to have many ideas, and then at least one of them will work.
Exactly. No, definitely creating that space and headspace and capacity to do that. That's why I think AI is really exciting because, you know, some people find it a bit fearful or, you know, it's a bit, you know, scary because people think it will, you know, replace them. But the way to look at it, the way I certainly look at it is, you know, it creates the space. You know, if you're getting rid of some of the mundane tasks, it can actually create the space for you to be more creative and to be able to think differently. I mean, everyone complains they don't have enough headspace, right? So that's where I think we can really like lean in, which I think is pretty exciting. Yeah.
That's so true. So you mentioned you were a customer officer and now a product officer, and something we talk a lot about on this podcast is like customer-led growth versus product-led growth
Yeah.
versus, you know, sales-led growth. What's your take on that? Like with SiteMinder, what's been the instrumental growth factors that you've seen?
Yeah, this is a topic that's very close to my heart, actually.
Great.
Look, I think first and foremost, your customer is at the center of everything you do. That has to be, right? That the customer is who you're building for, your customer is who you're selling to, your customer is who you're using your product. So of course they are at the center of everything. But I am a really big believer that everything should be very much product-led. And I say that because if you think about building a solution, you really need to be building it in a way that it is intuitive, that it is easy to use, obviously that it meets a need or creates an opportunity for a customer. But, as much as, being able to pick up the phone and talk to someone, certainly in our industry, a lot of our customers being in the hospitality space love that. They shouldn't need to be able to use your system. So this is where making sure that you can build out all the capability in the platform in a way that makes it easy to use, but also that all of the self-serve capabilities there. And so that if someone is stuck, if someone doesn't know what they need to do, you can actually give them the answer as and when they need it. Potentially even provide recommendations and other tasks, which again is becoming more and more and more available through new technologies. But actually, really helping the customer through that journey, but certainly making it very much so that growth, the adoption, even upsell capability, adding on new capabilities, new features should all be done within the product so that you're not reliant on people, you're not reliant on a sales team, although sales still has an important role to play, obviously. But I really am quite passionate about sort of that product-led growth as part of the platform.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, having the product sell itself and, being able to determine when it can sell itself based on people's journeys within the product.
Absolutely. And it almost perpetuates even better knowledge and growth within the platform. And why I say that is if you've got more activity happening in the platform, so if everything's happening in your platform, you've got more data, you've got more insights, you know more about your customer, which in turn can provide better experiences. And so it really just can kind of, really grow in value, which is another reason why I think it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. What about from a marketing perspective? Are there any specific, I mean, you've got a very niched audience. It's the hospitality industry. It's like specific ones in mind. What are some of the marketing campaigns that worked really well?
Yeah, so look, our platform is obviously all about getting the inventory, or as I said, rooms and rates out to guests through the right channel. So certainly there's an element of being able to understand what the right channel is. Let's take the direct channel for an example. So your own website, your own booking engine. So being able to help customers with understanding what might attract the right guests. And a lot of that we do through data, obviously understanding trends, understanding what's happening in source markets. As an example, we might know through our platform that actually there's a lot of guests who are looking in India at traveling to Australia at a particular time. So being able to marry those two things together and you turn that into an opportunity for a marketing campaign might be something that we can sort of enable through the platform. So I think all of it, everything's marketing really. When you think about it, we're all in the business of marketing because we're trying to make sure we get our guests connected with the hotel and our hotels more exposure to the right guests, as mentioned. So that's kind of how we sort of see it tie together. Of course, we work with a lot of other platforms and solutions that can obviously plug in and help our customers with some additional functionality as well. But that's sort of from an ecosystem perspective, how we see it all come together.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Everyone's in charge of marketing.
Yeah.
It's so true. And everyone's in charge of selling. But I think
Absolutely.
unfortunately a lot of organizations have split those departments up and they're like, you do this and you do that. And I think that's where it goes wrong, actually.
I totally agree. Yeah.
It sounds like SiteMinder has been really good at adapting to industry complexities. What advice would you give to other founders of SaaS that are wanting to do the same thing in their industry?
Yeah, look, I think, as a chief product officer, of course, I would say stay close to your customer. That's obvious. And you can do that in many ways, of course, through data, through actually, physically visiting your customer, making sure you're talking to them regularly. So that's really, really important. But I think, just also, as I said before, staying on top of what's happening in the industry, being able to understand how you can fill those gaps and those solutions. And of course, understanding and really thinking about how you can capitalize on some of the technologies that are out there. So I think it's a combination of those factors that I think are really important to deliver a great SaaS solution, no matter what sort of industry that you're in.
And product roadmap as well. I'm sure there's so much you want to do to the platform, but obviously limited amount of resources, time, what do you focus on? And, there's also a balance of what customers are asking for versus what should we listen to, because some of it might not, match with the company's values and plans. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I'm smiling because we quite literally had another debate about this just yesterday. But it's a huge challenge, and it's a huge challenge in any organization building software, because it is about getting the balance right. I think to ensure that you're delivering those intuitive experiences, you must continuously improve the experience. That's so important. And that's often the really small things that need to change, whether it's a UX tweak, whether it's a change to a feature or a function. And it's really hard sometimes to balance that against the new shiny thing, which of course, to innovate and to stay ahead of the game, you have to, of course, be continuing to move your product forward. But that balancing act is actually, critical. And I mean, add to that the tech work that needs to happen to make sure that your platform is scalable, that it can support your growth ambitions, to make sure that you're compliant. There's compliance, there's all sorts of regulations that you need to look after, data security, all of these aspects need to be taken into consideration. So, look, I don't know that I could sit here and say that we've cracked it, but we're continually having that discussion and trying to get that balance right. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has cracked it.
If they have, please let me know. But
I don't think even the big tech companies have. No, it's always a fine balance. And I mean, all of that changes in a heartbeat. So you need to keep on top of it all. Do you have like a percentage of your product team that is specifically focused on just innovating and nothing else?
Yeah, look, we've bounced around on this topic actually. Like, do you have an innovation hub? Do you just let everyone kind of have some time to innovate? We do have a regular hackathon event that we have internally that does kind of create this space for everyone to kind of come with any idea. Often we have a theme, but it's pretty open. So that's one way for us to kind of make sure that everyone's included, because often having an innovation hub, whilst it's really important to ring fence some capacity and some people to be able to focus in that space, often, you can cause this effect of, oh, but why can't I innovate? Or does that mean no one else is innovating? Which is certainly not the case when it's really supposed to be in your DNA. So for us, it's a bit of a combination of both. We do have some people that are kind of ring fenced at doing more of the discovery and innovation and thinking, quite differently about how we might solve things, looking at different markets that we might enter, or looking at different ways to solve or to take our product in a different direction. But certainly from a team perspective, we really encourage everyone to be thinking creatively about how we can solve the problem, and thinking as well about how we can solve it in a way that is smart for all of our customers. And that can be really challenging when we have a broad customer base. Yes, they're all hoteliers, but a hotelier for a small, boutique hotel is very different to someone who's running a chain. And so, understanding how we can do something and deliver something in a way that's not only innovative, but is a smart solution that can scale to both of those scenarios and both of those users is also something that we really try to encourage and embed in the organization, which is not easy, but it's something we're keen to encourage.
Yeah, and there's some really good points there. Just as you were talking about, we kind of encourage everybody as well to innovate. I was listening to a recent podcast by the Snapchat CEO, and he was saying he's got a very small team of 9 people that are focused on innovating. And I remember listening and just thinking like, oh God, if I wanted a job, like I would want to be in those 9 people. I wouldn't want to be in the other teams. So
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's good to give that to all people.
It's so true, because we have this problem. It's the same as, in some cases, and I've been in companies where there's one team that just deals with tech debt, one team that's just dealing with, customer customer issues, but that becomes quite painful and laborious over time as well. So in the same vein, I think it's good to have a mixture, or give people an opportunity to play to their strengths, because also not everyone does have that next big idea or wants to be in that space, but certainly not ring fencing or boxing people in I think is important.
Yeah, you never know where the great ideas are going to come from at the end of the day.
Definitely.
Moving away from product and a little bit about people and leadership style. You obviously manage a team of people. Any leadership tips, philosophies that have really helped shape the culture and the team?
Yeah, look, I really lean into what's called servant leadership. And I don't know if you've
Please
heard.
define that for me.
Yes, I shall. I shall. Look, it's really about, as the name sort of suggests, it's about serving your team. So it's really about empowering your team and supporting them in a way that is very much, very much the opposite end of kind of coming in and dictating and sort of being, the old school leader of the times of past, where you had your corner office and you kind of barked your orders at the team and shut your door and got on with your day job. It's very much about making sure that you are closely connected to your team. There's openness, there's trust, there's empathy, that you have, you practice things like active listening, which some of my team might say I still talk too much, but it's still about that connection and making sure you're really listening and hearing what your team need to be successful, and that collaboration, so that when you're making decisions, your team are part of that decision making, not making a decision, in isolation, which of course, doesn't help anyone and makes people feel quite confronted and challenged. So I'm a big believer of creating that kind of environment, which honestly, it's also creates a world where people can feel like they can be more themselves, which is so important, brings an element of trust. And all of that equals ultimately more creativity, and more motivation, more productivity. So I think that's probably the biggest, I suppose, framework or something that I probably really resonated with me when I learned about it many moons ago.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. It's very much relatable to my leadership style as well. I suppose I'm just going to play devil advocate for a
Yeah,
second, because where I've seen it go wrong slightly, is where you're so open and you're so kind that they kind of think um, they can come to you with everything and anything, and they almost start depending on you a little bit too much, to the point where they're not feeling empowered to execute on tasks. Have you found that happened at all, and how do you get past it?
Yeah, that's a great challenge. And you're absolutely right. There is a fine balance, because, you're also, as much as I very much see my team and my peers and, everyone at SiteMinder as part of my family. I really, truly do. It might sound a little corny, but I do. But you're also still there to do a job. You're there to run a business and to make that business successful. So it is a fine balance. I think the balance is about having enough of that openness, having enough of that empathy and that kindness, but still setting clear boundaries and making it really clear when you've got certain outcomes that need to be delivered, making it really clear. I mean, it's just communication, which sounds simple, but it's amazing how often that doesn't happen and the communication is, misconstrued or it's lost. So, I think it doesn't always work, but I do find that making sure you're really crisp and clear with what the expectations are, being clear with roles and responsibilities, as far as from a day-to-day what's expected of you, I think also helps. So really then overlaying that with that kind of openness really should enhance that and give people a clearer understanding. But it is one you still need to be mindful of. Sometimes people do say to me, "Oh, you're too kind. Does that mean you can't make hard decisions?" And that I don't think there's such a thing as being too kind, number one. But it doesn't mean you can't make hard decisions. I mean, I've certainly had to make some very hard and very painful at times, decisions that impact people's lives when it comes to, company reorgs or changes that need to be made in a business. But if you can do that with empathy and with thoughtfulness and, with clear communication, even that becomes an easier message to land. At least that's what I hope and I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. Key ingredients for building high-performing collaborative teams. Any advice?
Key ingredients, right. Well, I would say, yeah, look, number one, like as mentioned, communication, trust. I think building relationships is really, really key. I'm a big believer in team. I'm a big believer in, figuring out what equals high performing team is actually something that really excites me, which sounds a bit nerdy, but it actually, like, when you can look at the skills you have in a team, and quite often different skills, of course, will complement one another. And so, recognizing that and being able to bring those ingredients and those skills and capabilities together and figure out how that whole team then can uplift one another, rather than having, one standout superstar who's kind of doing all the work and is kind of elevating. It's about kind of getting the right ingredients in the team to elevate everyone, and ultimately then you get to that sort of high performing status. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Mm.
What about culture? Because I've seen, a lot of organizations, when they hire for culture, they end up accidentally hiring people that are just very similar. So they always
Mm.
just agree with each other. There's no one challenging anybody else. And maybe that can be a downfall.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if you have everyone that's the same, I don't think that works very well. I think diversity, inclusion, all of these things become so important. And it's certainly something that we're very passionate about. And I'm certainly very passionate about making sure that we have that mix. I mean, even building software, right? You're building software for many different types of people. So how would that possibly work if you are building it just with one type of person? I think it's interesting when, companies like Volvo recognized that they were building cars and, it was an all-male design team, but actually most of their cars were targeted at women and at a particular point. So they recognized that and made a shift. I think, that's one tiny example of what you might need to do with the right mix within your team, which of course then creates the right culture. And certainly having that diversity, I think, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important to be able to challenge, specific ideas and ways of doing things rather than just being agreeable and I
Definitely.
guess, becoming a bit more complacent that way.
Yeah, that fosters innovation as well, right? If you're coming
Yeah.
from different backgrounds and got different experiences, then that just brings a different type of conversation to the floor. So I think that's healthy.
Yeah. Looking to the future, what are some of the trends that you think are gonna break the SaaS industry or rock the SaaS industry? I mean, the AI is one I think we've been chatting about for a while, but what are
Yeah.
some other things?
Yeah, look, I mean, yeah, absolutely. AI, of course, it's going to change the game. I think moving from generative AI to sort of the agentic AI space is super interesting. So I definitely think there's something there that's going to be very interesting in how we interact with products in the future, and how products are created and how we service products as well. I think, just even the nature of kind of where the connectivity landscape is going. And what I mean by that is, the fact that I think because, as I said earlier, it's becoming easier, to bring people together and start a tech company. Let's say, a small startup can move very quickly. And we still have a startup mentality, but we're not a small company anymore. We've got 1,000 employees, and so we are not as nimble as perhaps we would like to be. But that actually can have its advantages as well, because it means that you don't need to build everything. If you have smart APIs, if you know how that data can flow in a smart way, then you can have smarter integrations and you can partner and have more opportunities, which also means you don't have to be all the things for all the different customer needs, which is also something that trips a lot of companies up, because, they're always saying, not one customer is really the same. Yes, there's similarities. Yes, we profile them and put them in buckets. But actually, when it comes down to even users within that kind of customer group, there's so many differences. So I think that's a really important piece for people to get their head around for the future. And obviously, just data. Data. It's all about data. And I know
Yeah.
that sort of leans into the AI story as well. But the more data you have, and that's something we're excited about, that thinking about how we can harness that and do more with it, in smart ways, and of course people often get a little scared about that too, but you've got more of my data. I mean, everyone's also witnessed what happens when your phone starts recommending things you've been talking about. So so there's scary ways to
I
do it.
quite like that,
Yeah,
actually.
well, I actually don't mind it myself, I have to say, but it's not for everyone. But I think there's really smart ways you can use that data to provide smarter solutions for your customer. So I guess the sort of three areas that are probably top of mind for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you're spot on. Yeah, I've had so many people freak out when they talk, and it's like Alexa's heard them or Google's heard them, and then on their phones they're seeing ads for it. But I mean, in my case, I'm like, oh, great, someone's listening.
Yep,
You know, I want
exactly.
personalized
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually use Facebook now more for finding products that I'm looking for than
Yeah.
connecting with my friends, which is a really interesting pivot for them because their algorithm is pretty good. They are a powerhouse for a reason, but some may see that as a negative, but it is an interesting kind of slant on kind of how you can use that data and how you can kind of bubble up different things for your customers' needs. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned 1,000 employees. I'm curious, do you have a hybrid model? Is it completely remote? How do you tackle that? Because a lot of organizations are now saying, we want them back 5 days a week, just like it used to be. And
Yeah.
everyone's freaking out about that. They're
Yeah.
like, I can't do that again.
Yeah, we too are freaking out about it. So it's look, we have a hybrid model. So we
Yeah.
have a combination. We have some people who are fully remote, and then we have some who come into the office 2 days a week, or at least 2 days a week. That obviously pleases some. There are some that definitely are still not very keen on that, particularly when we still have within a team. In most instances, the makeup of the team is hybrid, meaning you could be talking to someone in the Philippines, you might be talking to someone in Europe, you might have someone in your team, in India. So we're very global, and with that, means that people are having to adapt and be flexible with their work time, but also a lot of it's done like this. Online. So there is a resistance still, I think, for the coming back to the office, but we really believe in the power of connection, the power of people. I was only talking to one of my team just today who has got a new starter who has come into the office, and he said just that banter, with some of his new peers, and he's learning obviously just by being there and by having the conversation, the water cooler conversations, so you know what's going on, and also I think it's still, I don't know, there's something about coming into the office that also helps with the empathy and with the connection, the personal connection and the relationship that you can build with your peers. And I think that's, so important. We're all human. We spend a lot of time at work. I think that the old days of having work over here and life over here, that's just not realistic, and it's not where we're at. The two are very blended. And so I think we need to be able to, respond to that. So it's a tricky one. It's a tricky.
Yeah. For sure. I think definitely with new hires, it makes sense to go more rather than less until you've got those relationships built, and then you feel comfortable reaching out through other channels like Zoom, Slack, Teams, whatever that may be. I think there's also something about being next to people and just being able to ask the most absurd, random, stupid questions, which you would never do via email or Slack or Teams.
Correct. No, exactly. Even just by nature of sending a Slack, you feel like you're number one interrupting someone. You're thinking you just second guess yourself. Oh, that was a stupid question. So yeah, you're absolutely right that just being able to sort of sit there and have that conversation. Maybe it's just, as you say, even over a lunch in the lunch area or something, it becomes much more natural and much easier.
Yeah. Leah, my last question for you is if you could go back in time to 6 years ago when you first started at SiteMinder, what bit of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, that's a very good question. What bit of advice would I give myself? Look, I think I would probably say be patient, meaning, certainly joining a company that moves at a fast pace, that might sound like a silly thing to say, but also, sometimes things do take time. Change takes time. And we're constantly looking at how we can change and evolve, not just internally, but for our customers. And, sometimes, I can be very impatient and certainly have been in times of past. But recognizing that it sometimes like you, I mean, I'm very open to change. I love change. I change things constantly. My husband hates it, but I change things. But that's not for everyone as well. So maybe that's the other bit of advice, is also recognize that, sometimes whilst you want to move faster, you need to kind of bring others on that journey, and be able to kind of, encourage them and give them the space to take their time. And it will happen. And I've seen that happen. We've made so much change over the last 6 years, and a lot more to come. But yeah, that would be my advice to a younger me.
Patience,
Yes.
embrace change.
Yes. And recognize it might take time, that others might not be at the same spot, or the same point in time as you. So yeah, so that would be.
Love that. Love that. Leah, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. I think we've got some really good insights in terms of, what we can do with product-led growth, what we can do, about listening to customers and also people as well. I think we touched quite a bit on that, which was really cool. So thank you so much for all the tips.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've really enjoyed the conversation. So I hope there's something out there that for your listeners, that they're interested in, and that helps, because yeah, that's what these conversations are all about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.